students, we're going to start with trademarks, trade names, and trade dress. If you develop a brand, you're going to want to have a trademark, maybe a trade name. You just don't want to be John Smith Plumbers. You may want to be Safe Home Plumbers or Speedy Plumbers. And as you know, that may, if it doesn't have your name in the name of the business, then it's a fictitious business name and you'll have to register it. But if you spend thousands of dollars and years of time developing your brand, you're going to be angry if someone else comes up with a confusingly similar trade name or trademark. And so you have legal protection on that. A trademark is a distinctive mark or motto or device that you put on your product to distinguish it from everybody else's product. Trademarks and trade names are protected by the common law. That's the law that's developed through the court system. But trademarks are also protected by federal law, the Lanham Act, passed in 1946. And if you sue for damages because someone else is using your trademark or a confusingly similar trademark, the thing that you have to prove is what is called dilution. And dilution just means that they're diluting your customer base. They're stealing some of your customer base. Your sales have gone down because somebody else has a confusingly similar product or service. The trademark that they have doesn't have to be identical to yours. It just has to be so close that it is confusingly similar. You can register your trademark with the federal government. It doesn't have to be registered to have common law protection, but it helps if you register it because then you can prove that you were the first one to use it. The timing of registration is critical. When you do register your trademark with the federal government, you have to either already have it in use, you have to have a working business and a working product that you're marking, or you lose that registration if you don't go into use within 6 months after you register. If you have a complex product, you can request an extension and you can extend that as far out as 30 months. But they don't want people sitting on trademarks that are not being used. So you've got to either have the going product at the time you register the mark, or you've got to start using it within 6 months, or you lose it. Now, as far as renewal of the federal registration goes, the first time that you renew, you're required to renew between the 5th and the 6th years of registration. But after that, you're only required to renew once every 10 years. Now, why do you suppose they have a shorter time frame for the first time you renew your registration? Well, it's because so many small startup businesses fail during those first 2 years, and they want to know whether or not your business made it and you still have need of that registered mark, because if you're not using it, then they want to let somebody else use it. So the first time you have to renew your trademark registration within the 5th and 6th years, but after that only every 10 years. Now the mark that you use or the trade name or the motto, it has to be something really distinct. And you can't register generic terms like bicycle. You know, one guy registered the name bicycle. What would all the other bicycle makers and sellers use? So you could put super speedy bicycles or exotic bicycles or George's bicycles, and you could register that, but you can't register just bicycles. There's one exception to that, and that is if your advertising makes such a distinct use of a generic term, at some point you may have the right to trademark that as your particular mark. For example, there's a clothing line now that is called Pink. I think it's named after some woman singer, I don't know. But if I say to you Pink and you're a woman, then the chances are you know that what I'm talking about is a woman's clothing line. And so that word Pink could be registered as the exclusive trademark of the clothing company that manufactures Pink. It's interesting to me because 10 or 12 years ago when I started this course, there was a ladies' high fashion clothing company called Red, and everybody knew Red meant women's clothing. Last time I mentioned Red in the class, no one had ever heard of it, but they all knew Pink. So things change over time. Now, suppose I show you a little cardboard box about this big that you see on the shelf at the grocery store, and it's blue, but on the front is a picture of macaroni and cheese. If I asked you who makes that, almost all of you would say Kraft. Everybody knows it's Kraft. You don't have to see the name Kraft on the box. That unique little box with the blue color with the mac and cheese on the front, that's a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese. Yeah. And so the unique packaging, the whatever it is that you do with your packaging that makes your product distinguishable from everyone else's, that's called trade dress. And you also have legal protection for your trade dress. No one else is allowed to dress their product in a manner that is confusingly similar to yours. If they do, you can sue them and you can have that stopped. So, but sometimes people say, but wait, I see boxes of mac and cheese in the grocery store in a little blue box, very similar to Kraft's, and they're not Kraft, they're the store generic brand. So how does this grocery store get away with doing that? How come Kraft doesn't sue them? Well, that's a little bit different arrangement, because the chances are that that generic mac and cheese was bought from Kraft as production overruns of Kraft mac and cheese. And so they're actually selling you Kraft mac and cheese under the generic brand name, and because the grocery store is buying it from Kraft, Kraft is giving them a license to use a somewhat similar packaging. So that's how that works. As you probably know better than I do, you can also register trade names and domain names on the internet, and you have also a different way of doing that. If you get into a dispute over someone using a confusingly similar domain name on the internet, instead of going to court and fighting in an expensive lawsuit, you can submit that dispute to ICANN. That's ICANN. It's an acronym for Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And you can have your dispute resolved by arbitration in ICANN rather than going to court. We do have a problem with cyber squatting. Someone says, wow, someday someone's going to want to use John Smith Plumbing on John Smith Electronics and John Smith shoe store. I'm going to go down and register the John Smith Plumbing, John Smith Electronic, John Smith shoe store, every one of those I can think of. I'm going to register them in my name, and then when the real John Smith shows up and wants to use that, I'm going to tell him he can only use it if he pays me $20,000 to buy the name. That's cyber squatting. It's supposed to be illegal now, but we still have some problem with that, as you know. Another issue that comes up with regard to trademark and trade name and cyber squatting and domain names on the internet is what is called meta tags, M-E-T-A, meta tags. You probably know more about this tech stuff than I do, but a meta tag is a search word that you use on the internet when you're searching for something. But it creates problems when you have the feeling that that meta tag should belong exclusively to you and not be available for use by anyone else. Here's a couple of examples. For a time on the internet, if you typed in the word White House, one of the things that would come up was a porn site. And if you typed in the name Candyland, the children's game, porn site came up there too. An interesting case on meta tags was a woman who was the Playboy Playmate of the Month, a certain month and year, and she got done working as a model for Playboy, and she opened her own website where she sold autographed photos and things. And on her website first page there, she had there the fact that she had been Playboy Playmate of the Month for a certain month and year. The problem with that is anybody who typed in the search word Playboy, one of the places it would take you would be to her website. So Playboy told her, you have to take down the word Playboy on your website because it's our registered trademark and you're using it without our consent and it's deflecting some of our customers. And she said, well, wait, all I'm doing is I'm saying a resume thing. I really was a Playboy Playmate of the Month, and you shouldn't be able to stop me from saying that on the front page of my website. So Playboy sued her to stop her from using that tag, and the court said, you know, you go a little bit too far this time, Playboy. She should at least be able to say on her website that that's who she was and one of the things she did. So we're gonna let her do that. So that's one of the interesting legal arguments over meta tags. Now, if you can prove dilution because of a confusingly similar trademark or trade dress or trade name, the damages that you can recover in court are substantial. So you don't ever want to get caught up in having somebody having a trademark or name that's confusingly similar to someone else's, because they can get money damages for all the profits that they lost because they lost customers. But they can also get a court injunction. That's a court order that you have to stop using that mark or that name. And they can recover court costs and attorney's fees, which could be thousands of dollars. But perhaps the most frightening thing of all is if you've got in a warehouse 10,000 boxes of tennis shoes you want to sell that look confusingly similar mark as Nike or someone, they can also sue, and as a part of their court decision, they get a court order that all of that confusingly similar product be destroyed. So you can actually end up being ordered to destroy thousands of dollars worth of your confusingly similar product. So don't ever try to rip off somebody's trademark or trade name. Substantial damages. Now, another thing that happens on these trademark and trade name disputes, a lot of them don't end up going all the way to court. They don't sue for money damages, and they don't sue to stop you from using the mark. Instead, what they do is they contact you and they say, cease and desist from using this name unless you contact us and start paying us a royalty for permission to use our trademark or our trade name. And they get paid royalties, and so they're happy. They get paid a little bit of money, and they don't even have to sell a product. They get paid a little bit of money on each item of product that you sell. So a lot of these cases with trademark, trade name dispute get resolved by licensing. And because of that, and not only because of that, but there are people like Disney that have a whole army of lawyers that do nothing but hunt down people that are ripping off Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, anything related to Disney, and they send them these cease and desist letters, and they either sue them to stop, or they get a licensing agreement going with them, and they get paid royalties for the sale of the product. I was telling you about this in class one day, and one of the most fascinating things that happened in the 12 years or so I've been teaching this class, a young lady raised her hand in the back of the room, and she said, you know that stuff you're talking about, all the lawyers that big companies have to stop people from ripping off their copyright and their trademark? I know that's true because I used to work as a clerk in one of the big law firms in Los Angeles that represents Disney and hunts down these people. And you would not believe this, but there are two lawyers who get paid hundreds of dollars an hour to sit in a conference room all day long and do nothing but watch pornography videos. And what they're doing is they're scanning all the porn for any mention of any Disney character, the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella, Bambi. If they find any mention of any Disney character in any of these pornographic films, they immediately send out a cease and desist letter, and they either sue or they start getting paid a royalty. So there's a couple of lawyers somewhere in this country that maybe have a little bit easier job than I have. But that's pretty much it for trademark and trade name. Next section we will talk about patents.